Good morning. It is great to see so many familiar faces and so many new faces, so thank you for being here. As Emily said, I'm an executive coach. I'm the founder of Leadership Lab 19, which is an executive performance program. We've got LL19 people in the house today. And I wrote the book From the CEO's Perspective. And when I wrote the book, I was very passionate, one might call me obsessive, about a particular subject, which was 60% of US companies were facing a leadership gap. And so I got really curious. I started asking lots of CEOs what were they doing about it. And from all my questions, I wrote a book. So the people in it, Alaska Airlines CEO Phyllis Campbell from JP Morgan Chase, Ted Basler from Chateau Ste. Michelle, John Oppenheimer from Columbia Hospitality. And it's been a while since I've been so passionate about another subject. And the one we're going to talk today, leadership in these challenging times, is the one that has completely hooked me. And again, one might say I'm obsessing about it. And what I'm obsessing about is the growing wave of CEOs that we're seeing speaking out as leaders and speaking up as citizens. And we're seeing them speak out on social issues that impact all of us. And these aren't issues that are necessarily tied to their bottom line. CEO activism makes up two parts. What we're seeing is CEOs using their platform to garner support, public support around issues that are important, as well as leverage their economic power. And I have some examples of what's going on. So back in January 2017, which seems like 1,000 years ago, but it's not, January 2017, we watched 100 CEOs collectively asked federal judges to overturn the executive order banning citizens from 7 Muslim countries. Remember that? Microsoft, Apple, Chobani. Chobani's CEO is extremely active on the topic of immigration, and he received death threats. He received, people boycotted the product. So there's a lot of risk that comes with having conviction, as we all know. In August of 2017, Charlottesville, we saw Ken Frazier, Merck's CEO, speak out against the racism and the hatred in our political leaders' language. He stepped down off of the Manufacturing Council, the President's Manufacturing Council. And if you remember, that was the beginning of the unraveling of that council. February of 2018, what is it, just like 6 months ago, 8 months ago? Parkland shooting in Florida. We saw an eruption of CEOs take action. We saw Ed Stacks of Dick's Sporting Goods, who banned sales of assault rifles, as well as ended sales of guns to anyone under 21. We saw Delta Airlines, Ed Bastian, CEO. They lifted the ban, or not the ban, but they lifted the discount that NRA members were getting on their flights. And this one was particularly important because the Georgia legislator basically threatened Delta to say, if you don't reverse your course, we're going to rescind your tax breaks. And Ed Bastian, the CEO, said, this isn't an economic issue. This is, our values are not for sale. And my favorite CEO, Mark Benioff from Salesforce, who's super active in this space, tweeted that Ed Bastian deserves CEO of the Year award. REI stopped selling firearms maker Vista Outdoors brand. And Levi's just recently, a couple months ago, Levi's CEO Chip Bergh donated $1 million to end gun violence, and also received a lot of backlash from customers and concern from employees. And then in June, we saw the detainment of immigrant children, and we saw another eruption of CEOs speaking out. So that's how we're seeing CEOs use their platform for awareness. We're also seeing them use their power, their economic power for change. The bathroom bill in North Carolina in 2016, the bathroom bill basically said that it required people to use the bathrooms corresponding with the gender on their birth certificates, so anti-LGBTQ. PayPal canceled plans for a new global ops center in Charlotte. 80 CEOs and business leaders signed petitions seeking to repeal the North Carolina bathroom bill, and this was going to cost the state $3.7 billion. It was repealed a year later. Indiana had a similar bill that passed as well. Angie's List CEO canceled its expansion plans into Indiana. NCAA threatened to pull out. Their headquarters are based in Indiana, and they threatened to pull out. So again, eventually that bill was approved and revised. A revised version was approved. And then Texas in July of 2017 14 Dallas area companies took a public stand against a similar bill, and that was going to cost the state $322 billion in annual revenue and 730,000 jobs. And I think what's important here is this group of CEOs said they had adopted pro-LGBTQ policies over decades, but they said, but all of them put a premium on attracting a diverse workforce. And you certainly can't do that when you have passages of bills like these. So what's fueling all of this? We've seen CEOs and companies acting out. It's called corporate social responsibility. But this is different. And the reason it's different is because social media is such an amplification of this. And when you're using social media, as all of us know, the microphone is always on. And the other piece of this is the influence of millennials in the workforce. Millennials, they're more accepting of business, of mixing business and politics. And they want to know where their CEOs stand, and they base their buying decisions on that. And so it's not to say other generations don't do that. We probably all do that. But their sheer numbers makes that really impactful. So a lot of the companies that we see speaking out are Fortune 500 companies. And there are a lot more companies speaking out, not just those. But there's a lot of risk that comes when you're not a Fortune 500 company, when you're a smaller company. And so we have a panel of CEOs who are also founders who are going to talk to us today about what they have to think about. When do they step in? When do they not step in? What are the risks they have to assess? And then also, what do they think about what's going on today? So on that note, I'm going to go back to the book for a moment. Anybody who's been here knows that there's a tradition that we have that, I also want to recognize one of our other board members, Mark Cosentino, who's sitting here. Our tradition is so everybody in the book, I asked, what's the one behavior or trait that you think every leader must have in order to be great? And of the 20 CEOs I interviewed for the book, I got 19 different answers. And of the leaders, all the leaders that I've interviewed to date and coach and everything else, I still get hundreds of different answers. And what that tells us is there are as many ways to lead as there are leaders. And so when I introduce our panel, I'm going to reveal what they said. And the reason I do that is because I think it gives us a little bit of a window into how they think and how they lead. So on that note, I'm going to ask Scott McFarlane, the CEO of Avalara, to join me on stage. Scott said authenticity, which is exactly the word I would have chosen for him. He says you must be authentic in not just what you say, but how you say it. That's what matters. If you can't do that, you don't have the right to be a leader. Being authentic makes you a better communicator and a better leader. Scott McFarlane from CEO of Avalara. My next panelist is Sherelle Klaus, which is my dad's name, Klaus, which is so unusual. Sherelle Klaus is the CEO of Dry Soda Company, and Sherelle chose courage, which is also mine. She says CEOs must have the courage to stand up. In the last several months, I feel very differently about the importance of speaking up and taking risks. And I'm super excited to hear all the work you've been doing since we talked earlier this year. Sherelle Klaus, Dry Soda. Our last panelist from Rover is not here. He will be here for Q&A. Unfortunately, he won't have a clue what we're talking about. Well, we have a ghost sitting in, so we're just kind of wing it and see what happens. Okay?
There you go.
I know they're up for it. We'll make sure I am too. So what I'd love for you both to do is just introduce yourselves and introduce your company. We'll start there.
It's Scott McFarlane. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Avalara. We started the company on Bainbridge Island 14, 15 years ago. It automates sales tax. It might simply be the most boring subject. You know, I mean, it's not really good around the cocktail table. But the business of sales tax, you know, automating sales tax is just a fascinating business. And, you know, Avalara has grown to a pretty good size now. We did our IPO earlier this year. Which was an interesting experience in and of itself. But our goal is to automate be part of every transaction that happens in the world. I mean, that when we wake up every day, that's what we think of in our mission, and we're trying to do that.
And how many employees?
We have about 1,600 employees on 4 continents now.
Wow. Okay. Sherelle?
I'm Sherelle Klaus, and I'm the CEO and founder of Dry Soda. And Dry Soda is basically trying to make refreshment beautiful again, or to start with. It's never been beautiful. The idea really was, I started the company 13 years ago. I wanted to create a beverage that would pair with food when I couldn't drink because I have 4 children, which means I kept getting pregnant, which means you can't drink. And so I created what I considered a culinary-inspired soda. And it's called Dry Soda, meaning it's less sweet. It's nationwide now, and in I think 12,000 doors now. And we most recently launched a zero sugar line as well. So we're trying to change the way people think about diet sodas as well. So some of our flavors in our culinary line are lavender, juniper berry, Fuji apple, things like that. So it's just a little bit different. And then and now we have the zero sugar line, and we're based here in Seattle.
And vanilla too, right?
And vanilla bean. Well, there's lots of flavors, but yes, vanilla bean's one of them. That's pretty popular.
That's kind of my favorite.
Whole30 compliant.
Yes.
Nice.
And organic.
I've been doing that program, so that's really important.
Yes,
that's really
go.
important.
Yes. And the zero sugar line is organic.
Fantastic. I'm in now.
Good. Perfect.
This is going to rock. So this is where we get to know each other a little bit more closely. So if you could both lean in, this is going to be kind of a game of ping pong.
There you go.
Okay.
Because there's 2 of you. This is where I get to ask questions really fast, and you get to answer them. So it's way more fun for me than it is for you, but that's okay. You're up for it. And I'm going to give you errands, too. So, Scott, if you were in a band, what would it be called?
Oh, the Destroyers.
Awesome. Will you wear masks?
No, we probably would need to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sherelle.
Hide our identities.
Sherelle, who's a leader in history who influenced how you think?
Madeleine Albright.
Scott, what is one of your weird quirks?
I mean, that would be, I don't even know. I can't even imagine what it would
Any
be.
Avalera people want to win?
Yeah.
All right.
I stay up. I stay up really late. I mean, all the time.
Okay. Sherelle, what's one of your pet peeves?
Well, people who, when you get off the airplane, people who get up and cut in front of you that aren't supposed to. You know how you're supposed to just do it? I get really, really annoyed. I did too many flights, and I'm like, airplane etiquette, and I was just in Sicily, and they do not do that there. This one guy knocked me over. So,
Scott, name a book you think everyone should read.
Leadership and Self-Deception. I think is a really great one.
It's a really good one. Sherelle, what's your favorite question to ask at dinner parties?
are you single?
Can we just get cocktails now? I just think we should have cocktails. Scott, if you were a host of a talk show, who would be your first guest?
Jimmy Fallon. I've always wanted to meet him. He just sounds like a fun guy.
He seems like a fun guy. And both of you. So you're leaders who love to win, or you're leaders who win. Let me ask you the question. Is it because you hate to lose or because you love to win?
I think my children would say it's because I hate to lose. But I love to win. It's so exciting.
Okay.
I would say it's because I hate to lose.
Yep. I hate to lose too. All right, give it up for our panel.
Nice job.
So, Scott, you mentioned that Avalera went public this past June. Congratulations. So when we generally think that customers' buying decisions and the stock price dropping are the two biggest risks to speaking out. But data suggests that avoiding CEO activism because of worries about stock performance is misguided. What are the hidden risks in a public company for all the public companies that are speaking out?
For speaking out? I mean, it's I wouldn't say, I don't think about it from a day-to-day perspective of what's the stock going to do? Because I don't think like that, because we have a business plan. We're set up to execute on that. But I do think that the risk for us is, how is it perceived, inside the company? I mean, when I go to work every day, my job is to take care of 4 constituents, really. I mean, and especially as a founder, because when you start out, if you're a startup company, I mean, its credo, right, is to live another day. I mean, you wake up every single day, how do I get to tomorrow? And so you're very myopic in the way you think about things. And as you get bigger, your responsibility is to the 4 constituents, which is your employees, your customers, your partners, and your investors. And you get very myopic about that. And so I think you come up in this protective world. And so when you go public, it's a different feeling, and you still have the old habits that you have, and I'm still learning what it means to be a public CEO.
Yeah.
And so it's not so much risk that I fear, it's losing the focus that I've always had. That's the biggest risk for me. I mean, to get outside of my comfort zone and outside of what I know really well, and how does that affect the 4 constituents that I've grown up with for 15 years.
Yeah. And so here's how this is going to go. I'll ask different questions, but if you want to weigh in on each other's questions, that's okay too. Okay. Sherelle, how have these kinds of issues that we're seeing out in the world today, how are these changing how you think about your role as a leader?
I don't think I thought that it was my role to stand up for any one concept or idea or area in that way as a leader. I thought my job was really to support my team, and I kept it pretty professional from that standpoint. But obviously a lot has changed in the last few years in this country, and I've seen, the day that Donald Trump won, I saw our whole team was in town, and half my team was crying because some of them are gay, and they felt that their rights were going to be truly trampled on. And it just struck me at that moment, that day, that I had to stand up as a leader, even though I knew there were people in the room that had voted for Trump. How do I try to bring this together and care about those issues? And I think everything changed for me on that day.
Yeah, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really fantastic example, because the same thing happened in our company, and you have to, I mean, when I look at it, I try to take it not as a world view. I mean, I'm not sure that I have a voice yet for anything beyond where we are, but you do have to have a voice inside your company. That is really the most important thing. I mean, and I applaud Mark and other people who speak out, but really, every single day we would come to work saying, okay, how do we make everybody feel included? Because there's always opinions on both sides.
Right.
And it's hard to take a specific stance, but you just want to make sure that you have a safe, inclusive environment for people to share their views and have different views.
And have either of you had employees ask whether or not you're going to speak out on a particular issue, or been encouraged by employees to speak out on a particular issue?
I haven't.
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to get that more and more, and we have a team of people now. I mean, we've been growing, and we're really trying to focus on this. So, internal communications. We have an engagement and diversity leader. I mean, so there's lots of voices, lots of places where people can talk, and I'm constantly now being, made aware of, and whether I'm making it or I'm creating an environment where other things can happen in the company that might not just be me. I mean, we're sending out you send out a note that Veterans Day is coming up, and how we're having a resource group around that. Come share that. So we're trying to take current events and make people feel, more inclusive.
Is that different than? Is that new, or is that?
Oh, it's new. I mean, it's new. I mean, it's the awareness that we have today. I think it's the right thing to do. We have not done that. So in the last year, we've really tried to make an effort to create more inclusion.
Okay. Sure.
And I guess I would say, one thing I would say is I think I have an all-female executive team, which is really unusual in the beverage business. Well, it's probably unusual anywhere. Let's be honest. So I think there's an expectation from the female leaders and even just all of the female members. We have a fairly a majority of females on our team that I will speak out on women's issues. I feel like no one's actually specifically asked me to do that, but I think they would be real disappointed if I didn't do that.
And do you find, if you're speaking out on a particular issue, do you find that you risk alienating others?
Well,
when you're not speaking on those issues?
You know what? That's a good question, and there is certainly a possibility that could be happening. But I like to think that women's rights, minority rights, those are rights for everybody. That's it's good for everyone. So I don't know that any male in my company would be like, well, why aren't you talking about my issues? Because I feel like that's an issue that affects everybody. So they have daughters, they have wives, they have sisters. It's an issue for everyone. Mm-hmm. So I don't feel like I'm excluding anyone. No one's mentioned it.
So Scott, I remember when you entered my radar, which was about this time last year.
Yeah.
And it's because you had written a memo to the employees, and it leaked to GeekWire, and that's where I found it. And if you could give us a little bit of background on what the memo was about and what has transpired over the last 12 months since you wrote it.
When you start doing a startup and you create a culture and it's working and the business is building, which Avalara has always done. It's been a fast growth company in a really fantastic area, and we've wanted to create a world where we were different than everybody else. I mean, we were a disruptor, and we really wanted to change status quo. Mm-hmm. And as you did that, we created a world that was around using a tiki hut as a trade show booth at an accounting convention. Right? We do 400 today. We do 400 trade shows, and we have a tiki booth. We have a tiki hut at them. And yes, we serve.
That's not even one a day. That's
we'll have multiple going on any day, and we serve margaritas. I mean, so at the trade shows, I'm not sure we actually do that as much now because I'm not sure that you're allowed to do that in trade show halls. But that was really what our culture was, and it really wasn't about the margaritas. It was about our imagery that we wanted to create at our company was. Hey, sales tax is something in a digital world is not going to be manual. It's going to be, it'll absolutely be automated. And so we wanted people to think that they had something that they could do better with their time, mm-hmm. And we wanted to, hearken people back to whatever it was, sit on a beach, go play golf. But if you didn't deal with sales tax, you had more time to be with your kids, to do whatever you had to do. And it just so happens that a tiki hut really manifests itself, really well in taking people to a place that's different than their normal
Taxes.
Environment. And so we had this whole fun thing going, and I would say in our company, as it grew, fun started to take over a little bit too much. And I've listened to some of the panels that you've had before, and one of the things that was most striking in one of the conversations that I heard when I was prepping for this, which was, when there's warning signs, what do? And everybody else answered on your panel. They were so eloquent in the way they answered that question. It was like, oh yeah, well you jump on it right away and you just crush it out of there and you have to do those things. Well, I did not do that. I was not that good at that. So, because you don't want, things are going well with the business and you don't want it to change, even though you know it should change in your heart. And so it got to a point in our company where I had to stand up and say, enough is enough. The good old boy network, the drinking thing that was going on, all of that just was not, there was no place for it at Avalara any longer. And what I was proud of that email because I said, hey, listen, I have been in this culture. I mean, I started this company. I am part of this is anybody. And so I said that I was not going to do it and I was not going to tolerate anybody that would do that in the company. It wasn't the end of fun, but it was just a different time, and it was really an awakening for me personally. Now, I did learn a second thing that I had no concept of. See, I mean, all my other CEOs, everybody they are so much more enlightened than I am. I mean, really, I listen to them and I'm like, holy criminy. So I put this out as an internal memo to the company. And I had no concept that anybody outside of our company would care one whit about what we were doing. And the next day I saw it published in GeekWire. That was a shocking event for me personally, because it just had no intention. It was just for our people and whatever. And I think it was good. I was very proud of it. I felt for the very first time that I was a CEO. You know, that was a defining moment for me. And I said, that's the kind of person I want to be, the kind of leader that I want to be. And it's really helped me, you know, find my internal voice, internal voice for Avalara.
And since then, what have you learned?
Well,
or what's been your biggest learning?
You know, I have learned that if you do not deal with these issues quickly and swiftly, there's just an undercurrent in the company, and you can't. I mean, you've got to stamp it out wherever you can. You have to create safe environments for people to be able to talk about issues. That you have to be actively involved every single, you know, day in the environment that you're trying to create and improve. And that comes with a much more active role in inclusion, because once you make that commitment, once you do that, then the things that might have happened in the past would never happen in the organization. Mm-hmm. It just wouldn't. And you know, I'm really proud. I mean, Amelia Ransom, who's here today, is our engagement and diversity person. And we said, okay, we are going to put our money where our mouth is. We're going to create programs. We're going to do trainings. We're going to help, you know, our environment be a better environment for people to, you know, to work with. We have another lady that's here that's head of our corporate experience, you know, because we really want to create an environment that's not only visually pleasing for people to come to work at, but it's a place where, you know, good things can happen.
So staying on that same, so what you were referring to, the question I asked was about Nike, and it was the last panel that we did, because that's when we saw 11 executives exit Nike because of sexual misconduct. And last week we saw a huge Google walkout because of the huge severance packages that Google executives are getting and leaving because of sexual misconduct. So, and this started at the top. It certainly started at the top at Google. And so just thinking about from a CEO's advice standpoint, what advice do you have for the CEOs of those companies to get a hold on this?
Well, I think it's about, for me, it's not, sexual misconduct comes from disrespect and people not understanding the power that women should have. So I think first and foremost, you need to empower the women in your company, and you need to have women on the board of directors. That is the bottom line. And until we have women in true leadership positions, you're going to continue to have sexual harassment, sexual assault. And I think that's the thing that is just so mind-blowing to me, and why I changed my perspective on speaking out, is when Donald Trump became president, I bawled my head off, not for all the crap I knew he was going to do. I was upset about that too, but it was like, it felt like the world was saying, we don't give a shit about women. Women can be sexually assaulted. Women can be thought of as property. And I'm like, did we just move back 100 years? It just blew my mind. And obviously I feel very passionate about this, and I think it is absolutely time for these companies to put their money where their mouth is and have women in leadership. Women deserve those roles, and it makes for a better community. It makes for a better business. It's not just about, that's why when I was saying, I don't think the males in my office are going to care, because it makes our business better. So, sorry, I got a little passionate.
Good, that's why we're here. Scott, any comment?
You know, I mean, I think I would echo that. I mean, I do think that you just have to take an active position on females in the workplace. You just have to do that because I think it's obviously representative. It's really when it's all said and done, there's social reasons and all the things that we talk about, what's right and wrong, but it's just really good business. I mean, that's what it really should be. It should be because women in the workplace make business better. And once you start with that and you have that perspective, I mean, a lot of things really line up for a company and a CEO.
So
Can I say one other thing on that too? I think another piece that would be really critical to stem the tide of sexual misconduct and assault is equal pay. The women are making the same amount of money, and it's that part of that concept is if you're in the same position and the male is making more than you, there's a power dynamic there. So equal pay, that's got to be. I think that's a huge one too.
Mm-hmm. So as we're seeing all the CEO activism out in the world, we're also seeing the employee activism, and that was the Google walkout. We're also seeing Google employees, Microsoft employees protesting or petitioning for the companies not to work with the Department of Defense and whatnot. I'm curious, what do you guys think of organizations like, I think it's called coworkers.org, where it empowers employees to take more control over influencing the companies, where the company's going? What do you guys...
Well, I have a very small company. I love that concept. I think that, again, it comes back to you have to listen to your team. Your team is what's making your company. It's what, I mean, for me, it's really literal, right? Like, I came up with this idea, and now these 20 people are making it a reality and making a dream. So I think you truly have to listen to what they care about because it's about making this empowered workplace. I think it's all about empowerment for me and always has been. And unless you're listening to them and caring, I think it makes it challenging. I'm not saying you can hit what everyone wants, but I think employees have to have a voice in the company. It's why all my employees have ownership in the company. It's like we're in this together, and if we don't feel like we're in it together, and I don't think you can feel like you're in it together unless you have a voice.
So all of this stuff, you don't learn it in an MBA program. You sort of learn it by, fly the plane while you're building it. So what, if you were writing a playbook for CEOs on CEO activism, on CEO speaking out, on things to think about, things to do, not to do, what would be your advice?
Well, I mean, I think you have to be thoughtful about it. And what I mean by that is that you really have to spend time to identify what's important to you and what's important, in doing that. And I did this one exercise, and it didn't go as far as it should, but I would really encourage everybody out there to do this. Actually, I wrote a letter to my daughters. I have two daughters, and I started writing it when they were 14 years old. And I gave it to them on their 16th birthday, their 18th birthday, when they got married, and when they have kids, I'll give them one at that one. And each time I improve it. I try to update it, and it's a letter called A Life Well Spent. And so when you start thinking about what's really important to you and what you want your kids to think of you, and I always said, okay, if something happened to me, I wanted my kids to have a version of me that they could look back on and say, this is who Dad was. And, it talks about adversity. It talks about marriage, and it talks about all sorts of things, right, that are personal to me. But when you go through that exercise and do that, I mean, it starts to center you on who you are. And that's why I always say about authenticity, because it makes you, you learn, who you are, because you're telling your kids this is who you are, and they see it. And if you are lying, your kids will know it faster than any employee you ever had, right? And if you carry that through your life, I think that's what I would give people. That's the advice I would give people, is to figure out who they are, what they're about, what they're going to stand up for. And I'll just give one last anecdote on this one. When I was interviewing Amelia, and I learned the second thing in this one, if you don't learn things from interviews, you're probably not hiring the right person. And she said, Scott, listen, you can create any company you want. You can have any company that you want. It can be 100% male dominated. It can be, it can have any attribute that you want. So what is it that you want? And you have to define what, and that was like, holy crap. I mean, that was really impactful to me, because that was there about when they write the book or they write the chapter about who you are and what you are, what do you want it to be? And that's a daunting thing. That's what I would challenge people to do.
Yeah, it is a daunting thing. I was actually writing about that for Forbes yesterday because, when you are that solid in who you are, your values aren't negotiable. And you can have conviction and be strong in your conviction, and you don't waver.
But excuse me, but the one thing though, it does change, as you grow up, right? Because being a CEO is like having kids, right? There is no book on how to raise kids, right? There's just nothing. And so there's lots of books written on raising kids, and there's lots of books on being a CEO. But you just have to go through the experience yourself, and you learn and you change. And if you don't learn and you don't change, you're not going to be a good parent, and you're not going to be a good CEO.
Cheryl, so I think that for me it was, it's about authenticity too. It's not to steal your word, but I think what we talked about in that when you called me, and it's for me that I was very nervous to speak out on anything as a new young CEO. I was in my early 30s when I became a CEO. I had no idea what I was doing, so I was very nervous about that piece. But I think when it came down to what really matters to my team and what really matters to me, it's very authentic. So the advice I would get is to maybe stay away from some of the political stuff, but what truly means, what's hurting you? What do you want to see fixed? And obviously, I'm incredibly passionate about empowering women. I have 2 daughters, and I have 2 sons and 2 daughters, and I want to see those young women become who they want, and it is heartbreaking to see them deal with sexual harassment, deal with really unfair things in their world right now. And I want to raise these sons to respect women and to understand that they can see their dad be a stay-at-home dad and their mom work, and then they can see their mom be a stay-at-home mom. They can see it both and understand that. So I think it's truly about, just like you said, if it's authentic, then it's going to ring true through your whole brand. Because for us, it's about a brand. I'm building a brand, and I have to be very careful with that. We're very careful about being really authentic with that brand. So so authentic to your brand and to who you are too.
And if I might just add to that, people grow, right? I'm not the same person I was, 10 years ago, and that's, I think, you think you're authentic in one way, but then you just have to continually to say, is that the person I want to be, or can I even get better? And if you have that attitude, because I think, I've changed through this whole process. I think I'm better at understanding things that I didn't understand, when I was younger, and I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah, hopefully we're all on that evolution. So here's my last question. There's a possibility, according to NPR, that we're going to start to see blue and red companies, and we sort of, in some ways, do. But where do you think this is headed? This leadership, activism, CEO. Where do you think this is going?
I don't like that concept of blue or red. I think it comes down to, if it's going to be political, it's not going to work. And I think empowering women, empowering minorities is not political, and it drives me freaking insane. That's my pet peeve. That would be my pet peeve. You can step in front of me on an airplane now, but don't do that. It's turning this into a political argument. It is not a political argument to empower women and minorities. It just isn't. And so for me, I think if you start to do that, I think you're going to have challenges, and I think it comes back to what do you stand for, like we've just been talking about, and what does your brand stand for? You know what? I think this country is divided enough. I hate to see that our capitalism is going to divide us even further.
Yeah, the concept of making things that aren't political. That's just an awful process, and so many people try to do that. And our current president, no matter what side you are on it, he makes everything, political, and it's very, very difficult. I have to just say, from a personal perspective, the divide of our country between the concept of red and blue is just so disappointing to me. I mean, it's just not. It's not healthy, and it's almost impossible today to have conversations with people about things that we should be talking about because we're so polarized, and we've got to find a way to bridge that gap. This is a political statement from Scott McFarland. I mean, we just have to find a way to find a better meeting ground than we have. But we have to keep inclusion and things like that are just, I think, just wrong out of the political environment.
Yeah, and I guess what I would add to that is that it's just human rights. That human rights has become a political, just all the way around with the immigrant situation. It's just mind-blowing to me. And that if we truly were, I think, a country of values, as opposed to these policies, I think things would be a lot better. And I do think I put a lot of the blame at Donald Trump with his political rhetoric.
And frankly, this is why I hate the fact that CEOs need to speak out, but I'm grateful that they do. And I'm grateful for the wave that we are seeing. So I'm going to turn it over for Q&A. Who's got the first question? If you don't have questions, I certainly have more questions. Is Aaron here? No? Okay. Here we go. And please introduce yourself.
My name is Jacob. I work at Rover. So my question is...
Dude, you could have come up here and
Yeah.
chatted.
I'm Aaron, everyone. My question is specific to Scott, and I'm sure you've written memos and emails to your employees too. How do you write those memos, and who do you think about? Who do you visualize? Do you have someone in mind, kind of like an archetype of someone in your company, or how do you write in that conversational tone?
I don't have a prototype. I mean, we maybe have a prototypical person that we have, a customer that we're thinking about. But when I write those, I don't. I mean, they're really from my heart. And then I have two people that have been around. One that's from internal communications that really helps me, but a gentleman that's been with me from the very, very beginning that sort of has the voice of the company, and I will just sit and bounce things back and forth. But we're always constantly trying to find a way that it makes sense in my voice. How does it become who I am, so people know that it's genuine, right? That it really is it's meaningful. Because I think that's the only way that it has impact.
Can I follow up on that question? So, given what happened, which was that it leaked, are you thinking about things differently in terms of how you communicate in writing to your employees?
I would be lying if I said I wasn't, and I find that, I find that to be sad, to be truthful. I just wish I could speak to my employees just in the way that we would just have a conversation, and it wouldn't be on the front page, because I think it creates risk to do the right thing, and that is that's no fun. That's probably the worst part of being a CEO today. It's really hard to be as authentic as you really want to be, and that's sad. So it's a constant battle.
Yeah, I mean that's how I think about social media, or just in general. The microphone is always on.
Yeah.
And that is hard. Other questions?
Scott, the difference between a privately held company and a publicly held company is vast, usually. And I'm really curious what kind of coaching you've received or direction you've received or are soliciting around the types of communications that you're doing. Are you getting professional advice to go one direction when you want to go another direction? And just some free advice.
I've been asked that question a bunch of times, and my answer is different than most people think. I do not find it to be terribly different to be a public CEO as a private CEO. We've been doing this a long time, and we prepped to be a public company for a long time. I mean, most people thought we'd have gone out 2 or 3 years, before we did, and we opted to stay private for a long time to get our internal world to, perfect, to get to scale, to do some of the things that we wanted to do as a private company was just easier to get us all ready and to do that. And as a result of all the prepping we did and a fantastic CFO, we've just stayed true to our path. We've said this is who we are, this is where we're going, public or private, this is what we're doing. And my CFO, who's just a fantastic, rock solid, gentleman that I've known for a long time and trust, we haven't had, because he's got everything under control. It's really taken a huge burden off of me. So I'm able to, run the business in the way that I think we can, the company really benefits. So I would say it hasn't affected me. Now, we haven't had trying times, and we've only done 2 earnings announcements, and we just did our second one yesterday. So everything is a little bit new, and that answer may change a year from now. I may say, "Holy crap, this is really hard." But for right now, it hasn't changed significantly.
Hi, Michaela Kiner. I'm with Uniquely HR. And first of all, thank you both for coming out and talking about these topics, and Terry for creating the forum. It sounds like you're both doing quite a bit to increase inclusion and create safe spaces. I'm wondering if you could just share 1 or 2 details or specific examples of how you're doing that for people who may not have done so yet.
I think for us, it's, one, we have an all-female executive team. We definitely have equal pay, ownership within the company. I think I am spending more time out speaking on this now. We're pushing hard to get the story out that we're an all-female executive team, because again, it's in the beverage business, which is extremely male-dominated. It was enough that I was a CEO founder in the beverage space. So I think it's about, and I'm really, really proud of that. And it's, believe me, I've got plenty of people that have said, "Don't you think that's kind of sexist?" And I'm like, let me tell you about why. Let me tell you how this came about. And I didn't necessarily have a big dream that it was going to happen, but due to personality traits and what I've learned works in our team, this is how it's come about. So I think it's just standing loud and proud on that is how I feel like we're doing it, and not because I was telling Terry when I first started the company, I never wanted to talk about being a female CEO ever, because it felt like I was going to complain. Everyone's like, was it harder to raise money? Was it this? Was it that? And I'm like, of course it was, but you don't want to hear me say that. And it wasn't until finally a few years ago where I was like, yes, I'm a female CEO, say all that you want, and here are the challenges. And I don't care if you think I'm whining, it has to change because I'm not the only one out there. So I hope that answers your question.
I would say, and I've already given a couple of these examples, really when we decided to really jump in on this and to be proactive about it, hiring Amelia and having an engagement and diversity leader, somebody that had direct access to the CEO, which is really important, and that's I think one of the keys to success. So, and her biggest function, and I would say she has all these fantastic programs around unconscious bias and inclusion and harassment training and all the things that you have to do, which we've done. But sitting in the office with her and she talking to you real is as good as it gets. It's like, you're an idiot, Scott. You have got to figure. So that, and I'm the kind of person I think that likes to hear that, and because it just makes me want to be better. That thing where we said about you don't want to lose. I don't want to do bad things. I don't want to do things that aren't right. And so to have somebody say, here's how you can get better is just like, it's fantastic for me. But you have to, so I've done, focus groups all over the globe. I have focus groups constantly, talking to people about, not what's good, because we know what's good, but what's bad. Tell me what's bad that's happening. And we've got our issues, and there's plenty of things that we talk about in those meetings. Creating an environment where people can come to Amelia, they can go to Sean and HR and talk about things. And the more I talk about it, the more comfortable people can get in doing so. We have a long way to go. I mean, but I think we're on the right path. I think we're doing the right thing. I'm really proud of the fact that I do have 3 females on the board. I think it's a fantastic thing. I would like to have more. I would like to have more because that's who I take my direction from, and having their perspective is wonderful. We have work to do on our executive team. I mean, we can get more females there. I think leadership is really coming along. But if you do those things and you're really vocal about them and say, I'll give another practical example. In our company, when we open up a leadership role or an executive role, you have to have more than 2 female candidates in the finals. Because it's really easy when you have 7 people and 6 of them are male and 1 of them is female to pick the male. It's simple to do that. It happens naturally. It's not something. But if you say everybody has to have 2 or 3 females in the running, then you are much more likely to have a female candidate get through the process of the unconscious bias or whatever you want to say. And so those are just some of the techniques that we've been using to be a little bit better.
And I want to emphasize something you said, and of course, Michaela, you know this. It has to be a CEO imperative. It has to come from the CEO. Anything around diversity, you cannot delegate that. It has to come from the CEO. Other questions?
The question is, what's your response then when people say that you're not getting the best talent because you've put this criteria in there, that it has to be a woman or it has to be a minority that you're passing? I mean, that's usually the typical argument, that you're passing over the most qualified or most talented. What's your response?
Well, Tamara, I hired you because you were the best candidate. For me, I didn't have an imperative to hire females. What I was discussing is that I have learned what is really critical in Dry, and that's ownership and cohesiveness. People that will take ownership without ego, and that will be very cohesive. And those are traits that are critical. Those are awards that we give out at Dry. And for me, the team that I have now exhibited all of those, and they all happen to be female, and oftentimes those do tend to be more female traits. So for me, I'm not, us, we don't have a policy where we're too small. But I do think part of the other thing too is, one of the reasons we got you was because of another employee at Dry that recruited you, who is also female, and I think that we're attracting that. So I do think as you start to have a really good company that is empowering of women, it's going to attract more women, and so that's my answer, but it's probably a little more accurate for you.
Well, I just fundamentally believe having more females or more diversity, let's just use diversity, more diversity at the executive level or at the leadership level is better for the business. Truthfully, just speaking candidly, I don't give a damn. What they say, because it really is. It's time that we don't put down those kind of excuses, and it's rare that that's probably true. It may be true in some instances, but what the hell? It's just time.
Any other questions? Because I'm happy to end on that note.
There
That
you
was
go.
a good note to end on. Thank you for being here. Thank you for representing Rover today.
And thank you, Terry.